Really looking forward to this. Please put your hands together for Andy Middleton.
If nature judges quality on the basis that it works, how do humans judge quality? Essentially, we judge it in terms of business, we judge it by the rules. Those rules are pretty universally set at the lowest possible level that the lobbyists and governing bodies of businesses can get them to while still maintaining the illusion of progress. If you just judge it by the rules, 10 out of 10 looks like the really successful delivery of products and services made by crap businesses that shouldn't exist. What we set about was asking, if we want to get to this place of saying, let's take away the impossibilities of incremental change and recognizing that ticking the box in the bottom left-hand corner doesn't deliver anything we want, and step instead to a different way of learning. And so we took learning from our times in nature and learning through the world of adventure. That's my business. We take 8,000 or 10,000 people a year out into wild places safely to do dangerous things. And we do that not just to have a nice time, but we get them to try and fall in love with nature so that they go back from those experiences so passionate about the experience they've had that they change the way they live and they change the organizations that they're with. You know, I draw on the experiences of my grandparents. My grandfather was a mountaineer in the 1930s. My father was a big hiker, and he still body surfs now at 93. Going surfing with a 93-year-old dad is pretty special. And I took my learning from that and said, well, what did I learn about doing this? We put it into this framework called adventure intelligence, which is learning from dangerous play in wild places, but applying it to the world that we've been talking about. And the first one is about being alert. And that's being alert not just to one or two facets of your experience, but alert to everything in the environment around you. When I talk to our adventure guides and say, well, how much of the time when you're out playing on a more dangerous day, how much of the time are you paying attention? They don't understand the question. Because the attention is so total. And it's attention of waves and wind and patterns and temperature and taste and touch and energy levels and skin color and movement. Not every 15 minutes, but all of the time, and constantly recalibrating what we're doing based on noticing what's happening. And that's what allows us to make choices so that if things go wrong, you've got as much information to do that. And when we talk to business leaders and ask what their level of alertness is around what's going on around them, it's not good. This is a younger version of me after quite a powerful learning lesson in Scotland. We got avalanched in the Cairngorms. And I got really good at avalanches. Luckily, I survived this one. I got really good at avalanches after the event. And what I learned is that it's quite handy to be expert at the things that might kill you before they happen to you, not afterwards. And so when we talk about risk, people say that those who do adventure, they do it because they like risk. No, they don't like risk. They like play. But to be good at playing in dangerous places, you need to understand risk. Now, the funny thing is, when we talk about risk in government, how many government departments have soil loss in the UK on their risk registers? None. How many of them have inactivity on their corporate risk registers? None. How many of them have the fact that 87% of people aren't engaged at work? None. So risk in a business context means just doing the operational stuff about today, getting your product out the door in the right way. We haven't found a way yet of looking at strategic risk. Yet in the outdoors, it's what keeps you alive, is being able to understand the relationship between the changing weather, the changing conditions, and your resources in making those decisions. You need to be ready. I spent 5 years on the lifeboat crew in St.Davids. And the one thing that we're trained to do on a lifeboat crew is that every person can do every job, because you never know who's going to turn up. Because you might be farming, you might be out doing something different. You don't know who the crew's going to be, so they have to train everyone up. But the thing with a lifeboat is that you have to be ready for what's going to happen before it happens. Otherwise, you haven't got the time, you haven't got the ability to respond. And I translate that to saying, well, what do we need to be ready for? And we've heard already today about, in the last session, from the session before, from Chris, about asking what your vision is. So one thing knowing what your vision is, but the next thing to question is to say, well, what do you want to do about it? If you walk out of here and have a conversation on the train with a stranger, and they say, I absolutely get what you're doing, what should I do? You need to be ready. You need to be ready with what to tell them to do to help them make their first step. So when we do meet those people that are running businesses, do run those people in heads of government, do meet ministers, we can tell them in really clear, practice-ready language. It's not the first time we've done this stuff. It's no good making you a very first time you pitch that idea. We need to practice this hundreds of times to go out. We need to be balanced. Being balanced in the outdoors means balancing the amount of stuff you take with you, balancing the size of team you work with, balancing what we're trying to do with our capabilities and understanding the boundaries. And we've heard an awful lot about the importance of balancing so many parts of our lives. But we need to balance, as we've hooked the inner work with our outer work. We need to balance our time in busy streets in London with time in nature. We need to balance it with our creative pursuits that feed us as well. Because no one thing won't work. That time in nature, experience in nature, we believe is one of the best ways of helping people recognize how little you can get on with and still staying in there. And understanding what's enough. What's enough safety kit is one question in the outdoors. You can't take flat pack helicopters with you. But at the same time, we need to know how prepared do I need to be before I go off and start making this stuff happen. That's also about understanding this. In understanding what the team needs to be around us to make this thing happen. Not long after surfing on this break here in northern Spain, I parted company with my surfboard, which is not a particularly good thing to do in big waves, and ended up swimming in quite difficult situations. And there were 30 or 40 other surfers out there. None of them came to help me. And it was someone who wasn't in a wetsuit on the shore who got their surfboard out and paddled out to rescue me. We need to understand who are the team that we need to put around us. Not just of people like us, but people who are not like us, to work that forwards. And understanding that when we're pushing things on the edge, everyone has to have that power. The knowledge of where we're trying to go, what we're trying to do, can't stay in the role of the leader. We have to give that away so that the whole team can make that point. And we need to have that focus on action. V1 is the point on the runway that you need to be off the ground. Otherwise you hit the trees. And we know what that's like from an ecological perspective, but we also need to understand what that looks like from the perspective of taking action. At what point, and we heard Chris talking earlier about that commitment, when are we going to do that? And how do we move forwards? But recognizing that action, the fear of action is often just a fear of failure. And without going into that here, these stories that, failure is just information. Failure in nature is the process that is the engine of evolution. So let's learn to treat it that same kind of way. And I just think we can do so much better than the crap products that we design and make and do every day in summer at the beach beneath my house. We get broken surfboards that are so cheap to throw away. They buy them for 10 quid, chuck them away, lie in landfill for 5,000 years. That's not the sign of an intelligent species, and we need to find different ways of doing that. So what we've been working on is 2 projects. Slipstream whales is the idea of getting wild geese flying in formation, save 65% of their energy. We think business and government could do the same if we got it shit together and worked on some really big, ambitious projects. So we're offering Wales as a template to the world, as a prototype space to do country-scale change. We're legislating on sustainability. And we're doing that by sharing the skills around this adventure intelligence idea of learning around action and so on, with a framework of what it takes, which is working out what's the absolute minimum you'd want people making decisions with billions of pounds of public and corporate money to know so that they can make better decisions. What's the absolute minimum? Get that in place across every single government department, every council, every elected member, so you can then have grown-up conversations with people about what counts. So the invitation to play is to get out of the city and continue these conversations on the coastline whilst walking and kayaking and hiking and playing and sitting around beaches and bonfires, to continue these conversations away from the urban environment, away from the noise of traffic and close to the nose of seagulls. Because I think when we do this in nature, as Mac does at Embercombe Places, the potency of the conversations dramatically increases. So this is an open invitation to let's make this happen, and play and learn during the daytime and sit around fires and pubs in the evening to work out the plans to making radical change happen. That it makes your hair stand on end and puts a beaming smile on your face that lasts you for days. Thank you.